Welcome back. One of the stories of this election campaign is certainly the Teal independents. They've knocked out a whole new generation of liberal moderates in and around Sydney and Melbourne. But the other issue here is what happens to Labor. Some have warned that Labor seats could be at risk as well. So one of the Climate 200-backed independents has warned Labor of the repercussions if it chooses to sideline the expanded crossbench. And this from Scott Morrison this morning on the campaign that the Teals ran.
It was incredibly tough, and I can understand that after all of that, as Barnaby said to me the other day, sometimes people like to change the curtains because they just like to change the curtains. Of course, I'm disappointed by the result, very disappointed for colleagues who won't be coming back to the parliament. And there are many issues there, but I know the new leadership of the party will, get around that, and the party will come together.
How long can we expect you to hang around in federal politics?
Well, I've got no plans to go anywhere, Ben. As I just said, I'm going back to the Shire and re-establishing our life back there, getting the girls back into their routine. I've just dropped them off at school this morning.
And joining me now is a new member for North Sydney, Kylea Tink. Thanks so much for your time and congratulations on being elected to Parliament. We just heard from Scott Morrison on radio this morning, essentially saying that it was a brutal and vicious campaign and that you, among other Teals, played things very hard. Is that true?
Look, from my perspective, I do agree it was a very tough campaign and it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. But running as North Sydney's independent, I don't think our campaign was brutal at all. In fact, it was the antithesis of that. And I think that's why so many people were drawn to the campaign and wanted to get in behind the push for change.
So Labor is going to get a majority. You won't have the balance of power. How can you actually deliver on your promises now, Kylea?
This is where the strength of an independent absolutely comes to bear, because regardless of who's in power, an independent representing an electorate has the right to be heard and a right to be seen from the crossbench. So I'm incredibly hopeful that we're about to enter a new stage of politics where that divisive, someone wins, someone loses style is actually set aside, and we actually start to work as we know Australians can work, which is together, collaboratively, to get to a really good end result for our communities.
OK, so the warning against Labor of sidelining you, what did you mean by that?
Well, I think there's been a lot of talk, Laura, about how this has been a movement against the Liberal Party. And I think the thing that I feel has really been lost from that conversation is the fact that this was about the party, but it was also about fundamentally a government that was not listening and refused to listen. And so when I raised that earlier this week, I was making the point that should the Labor Party, as they take government, choose to adopt a similar style of governing to what the Liberal Party did, then I have no doubt we will see people like myself and communities like the North Sydney community rise up at the next election and run against Labor candidates.
So, for example, climate change. Obviously, this was central to your campaign. Labor wants to see a 43% reduction in emissions by 2030. You want to see a 60% reduction in emissions by 2030. What are you going to do? Are you going to play hardball or are you going to be pragmatic?
Oh, no, I think that this is where the opportunity to consult comes in, and I'm very much looking forward to understanding what the government's plan is. I know for the people of Sydney, it's absolutely essential that we get faster action on climate, that we do everything we can to keep global warming between 1.5 and 1.7 degrees Celsius. So far, we've seen a headline carbon emissions reduction target, but little of the detail in terms of how that will be achieved. So I see my role as North Sydney's representative as going into that House, seeking to understand the legislative procedure that's being put forward, advocating for improvements on that where there are improvements to be made. And as you know, I've committed to tabling a private members bill to introduce fuel and vehicle emission standards as quickly as we can. That may be something that's not in that Labor legislation at this point in time. We don't know what's there. We haven't seen the full package. But if that wasn't there and the government was prepared to pick it up, that would be a way to bring our emissions down even faster. So from my perspective, I'm going in to be a constructive force, but certainly not a silent force, and definitely leaning into the government, asking them to constantly do better.